Welcome, everybody, to Radicalized Truth Survives podcast, episode 94. Today, the RadPod team is going to be interviewing Tom Carter, a veteran newsman who has spent years trying to get the media to pay attention to the dangers of a man named Leonard Leo, a one-man Democratic wrecking ball. Have a listen. Tom Carter, welcome so much to Radicalized Truth Survives. We are so grateful that you are here with us today. The work that you are doing is very, very important. And as our friends who also appreciate the work of Greg Olear, there's a very good chance that they've heard your long form interview, but we're going to be covering some of that turf and also addressing some new questions. You have been focused on Leonard Leo, like Jim has been focused on Mike Flynn. And we need people like you because these are the true threats to democracy. And Leonard Leo is somebody that our viewers know something about, but they're going to learn a lot more about him today. And where I'd like to begin is you are a veteran reporter. You were at Washington Times. In 2004, you saw Washington Times taking this hard right turn, which you were not comfortable with, very anti-immigration, all the things that we now know come from the extreme right narratives. And tell us where you actually ultimately met and then worked with and for Leonard Leo for 3 years. And we'll be explaining who he is along the way.
Great. Well, first of all, let me thank you all for having me. I embrace any chance to raise Leonard Leo's name and his profile, because a lot of people still don't know who he is. Where I met Leonard was in 2009, I guess. I had been working after leaving the Washington Times. I worked for a year with the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, which is part of Leonard's web, so to speak. He's on the board there, and he's a very close friend with the founder of the Becket Fund, a guy named Seamus Hassan. Anyway, I was brought to the Becket Fund to get them media. They were not a very well-known law firm. This was before Hobby Lobby and Little Sisters. There are two big cases that they won before the Supreme Court. They needed recognition primarily to raise money. They wanted to be able to go to their donors and say, see, we were in the Washington Post or wherever, we're important, give us money. But we sort of had a falling out because I was in favor of same-sex marriage and they were opposed. I just didn't really see what the problem was, how is it affecting your marriage kind of thing. Anyway, so we parted amicably. Seamus and I were still friends. And the Becket, USCIRF, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, was looking for a media director, for exactly the same reason. They'd been around for about 10 years, and they were about to sunset, is the official term in Washington. Basically, their legal mandate was about to run out, and they were about to run out, therefore, of money. They were going to disappear. They were going to sunset. And so Frank Wolf, a congressman at the time from Virginia, who was very involved, actually he's a commissioner right now, with USCIRF, was pushing the commissioners to get a media guy. You guys need more, a bigger profile on Capitol Hill. Nobody knows who you are. You need to get into the media. So I got hired by USCIRF to be their media guy. That was the first time I heard of Leonard Leo, or actually in any of his group or any of his crowd at that time. The guy that hired me, the executive director at that time, was a guy named James Standish. He's pretty well known here in Washington in the religious freedom community. He's pretty devout Seventh-day Adventist. Anyway, James hired me. But to make a long story short, Leonard and some of his cohorts ran him out of USCIRF. And so because of certain circumstances, they're a little complicated to go into, Leonard was elected chairman of the commissioners. We had no executive director. And so he became the de facto executive director and my boss for 3 years.
And this is where I'd like you to describe who and what he is or was during that period of time, and the scandal that immediately, or quickly happened thereafter, dealing with an employee that had been fired, because that'll factor into the conversation later.
Okay. At that time, Leonard was just another lobbyist in Washington, D.C., one of thousands. I mean, everybody has lobbyists. The Federalist Society had Leonard. And when he became the de facto executive director, the chairman of USERF, his very first act as chairman was to fire a young woman who had just been hired. She had not even started working yet. She had quit her other job. She and her husband were getting ready to buy a house. They wanted to start a family. She was about to start within a few days. She had been hired also by the same guy that hired me, James Standish. And Leonard said, nope, I'm executive director now. We're firing her. And he sent one of the staffers to meet her at Union Station over a cup of coffee. And he told her, you don't have a job anymore. Now, keep in mind, this woman, I don't want to get into her name because she doesn't like to be in media so much, but we had about 200 applications for her job. She was far and away the best. She was a lawyer. She spoke 4 or 5 languages. Wow. She was smart. She was great with media. I saw videos of her at her previous job. She was plugged in. She knew everybody. A young woman, just one of these typical high octane, high powered Washington types. And he fired her because she was a Muslim. She was coming from a Muslim organization, and he and some of the other commissioners didn't like that. And so they fired her.
Wow.
She brought a lawsuit. It was a long 5 years of a lawsuit. And eventually she won. She got a settlement. But I think there's some sort of a NDA where she can't talk about it. But I was told by commissioners on USERF at the time that she won and got some sort of money.
I mean, so much for religious freedom. And I bring that up because again, as we are living in this time of, a post-Project 2025 time, the othering has been cranked up to 11. And I am hearing people again bring up this anti-Muslim narrative. And these narratives have origins. And just for people to understand why it's so important that Tom is with us today, in my lifetime, in our lifetimes, things that we have been granted, freedoms that we have fought for, rights that we have fought for, have been taken away. And this man, Leonard Leo, is at the nexus of that because of the remapping of the Supreme Court. So I just want people to understand that there is a big play that is occurring, and this person is very well financed, very well networked, incredibly damaging to our democracy. And I've got a million questions, but I know the guys do too. Do you guys want to just jump in?
Let me jump in real quick there.
Sure, because, please.
When Leonard fired her, I could have worked with him. He was, like a lot of bosses in Washington, a bit of a jerk and, power hungry kind of guy, but I could work with him. It wasn't that big of a deal until he fired this woman. And it was at that point where I said, this is no good. A few months after that, Talking Points memo, Josh Marshall came out with a small piece that Leonard Leo and Jenny Thomas had just filed papers in Virginia to start what was called Liberty Central at that time. A short period after that, this would have been in the spring of 2010. A short period after that, David Korn at Mother Jones came out with a piece talking about Leonard Leo, Jenny Thomas, Liberty Central being one of the prime movers and shakers for the what's called the ground zero mosque in New York.
Okay.
There was going to be a big rally. Everybody was going to oppose it. All kinds of people were going to be speaking. Frank Gaffney, Pam Geller, a bunch of other anti-Muslim zealots. After the David Corn piece came out, Liberty Central went dark. And a few months later, they changed their name again. Heidi Presbala at Politico a few months ago wrote a story about how when Liberty Central went dark, at that time in 2010, this was in preparation for Citizens United to be passed, when they could spend dark money any way and everywhere they wanted. And I mean, this is a typical pattern of Leo. When a lot of scrutiny comes on his organization or him or some person, they disappear. They change the name of the organization. They move to Texas. They do what another example of that is Students for Life, which is I think it's Texas-based anti-abortion organization. Leonard was on the board of directors since 2008. Last summer, when he started coming under scrutiny, they would say, Students for Life says this, blah, blah, blah. Leonard Leo's on the board. When that started showing up in the media, they took his name off the masthead or whatever of the board of directors. So it's no longer there on Students for Life. Every time you see Students for Life, it's a Leonard Leo front group, but his name can no longer be found on the website. It was there since 2008. So anyway, I just wanted to.
Okay, well, so what I want to do is one more comment from me, then I want the guys to take over.
All right.
The reason I met you, and I'm so grateful to you, is Ann Nelson, as she does, sends me a message saying, you got to read this op-ed from this guy, Tom Carter. And in it, you documented your decades-long journey to try to get the New York Times and other media to focus on Leonard Leo and the danger of Leonard Leo and the damage that he had already done. And you tell the story amazingly well, but essentially, and I'm very grateful to you because you allowed me to publish that op-ed on my Substack at Betty Dangerous. But at the very end, and I'm going to quote you at some point, you basically talk about how not only was this very important story ignored, that it actually reminded you of what happened in the 30s in Germany, that all the signs were there. Everything during the Weimar years could actually predict what was happening, and that we are very much here at this precipice where he is all over Project 2025. And can you just speak on that for a moment? Because I want people, again, to understand why we're investing time in this today.
Well, first of all, let me just say Ann Nelson is brilliant. Her book, Shadow Network, is incredible, but she's also an expert on Nazi Germany. She's written 2 books on that period and some of the resistance that happened at that time. I forget the name of the book, Red something. But anyway, she's an expert on Nazi
Red
Germany.
Orchestra, and it's important.
Red Orchestra, right. So for her to see that op-ed and then pass it on to you is I'm incredibly grateful to her for that. Basically, what it boils down to is the old story of the frog in the frying pan. When it's 65 degrees, it doesn't do anything. When you turn it up one degree at a time until eventually it's boiled. And that's what's happening. That's what happened in pre-Nazi Germany. A democracy elected Hitler. I mean, it was not like he came in and stormed the Capitol or something. But he was.
He tried. He tried. There was the beer hall puts, but
Yeah, well, he stormed a beer hall, but it was not. It was a slow thing, and a lot of people who thought Hitler was a bad guy, they thought they could handle him. They turned out to be seriously wrong. And the same thing with Trump. I mean, you've got all the never Trumpers and a lot of people now coming forward, like John Bolton, like Bill Barr, who had said, Trump was a bad guy, just this week said, "Oh, he's a bad guy, but I'm going to vote for him." I mean, this is very scary and very, very interesting to me.
Very, very, very cynical. So I'm going to read this quote. Then, Jim, I want you to jump in and then high five. So the quote that I got from you that really jolted me to reach out was, coming up on November 2024 and a possible Leonard Leo Christo-fascist takeover of the United States, as detailed in his 900-page Project 2025, it looks like 1930s Germany to me. And it looks like it to us as well. Jim.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here and for your work. I can only imagine that the pushback has been intense.
Actually, it hasn't been very intense, to tell you the truth.
That's good. That's good.
I sent my op-ed to the Catholic League, Bill Donahue, hoping he would put out a press release to get some eyes on this thing, but he didn't yet.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes, I guess. But thank you anyway for being here. I've been very interested in, obviously there is a huge Islamophobic, sort of element to this. And one of the things that I've been interested is the sort of extremist arms of the Catholic Church. Obviously there's Opus Dei, there's the Knights of Malta, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, which is still around. I noticed Austin Ruse, for example, in your in the notes. Austin Ruse came after me personally when I started talking about the ESMOM and the Knights of Malta, and so I'm interested whether the that group has come up at all in your travels with this guy, because their sort of stated goal for 1,000 years has been to fight the Crusades, and so what I see is this sort of remnant of kind of extremist Islamophobic, feeling literally left over from, a millennium ago.
Right.
But I wanted to get your, because you were much closer to it. So I wanted to hear whether, any of that ever came up in your travels.
Well, when Leonard became chairman of USERF, I had to write a press release saying, Leonard Leo, Federalist Society, blah, 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 just got elected chairman of USERF, a little bit of his background. I sent it to him for, approval, and he sent it back and said, put that I'm in the Knights of Malta way up high. And I said, okay, what's the Knights of Malta? Quickly, I go look it up and, whoa, okay. Austin Ruse, he calls himself, he has in published articles, a close personal friend of Leonard Leo and a close politically aligned friend. This guy's, I don't know that much about him except for what I've read in Wikipedia and other places, but I mean, he's so bad the Catholics don't want him. And he's
he's real bad.
Yeah, very, very anti pretty much everybody who isn't a hard right Catholic. Anyway, he says he's Opus Dei. Leonard says he's not, but I would remind people that the 6 justices that he put on the Supreme Court also said that Roe was settled law.
Leo was on the board of Catholic Information Center, so
yes.
If he's going to try and dismiss
not only that
to Opus Dei, I think forget that.
When you walk into the front door of the Catholic Information Center, which also says it's not Opus Dei,
right?
Technically, there's a huge picture over the desk of Leonard Leo's daughter, Margaret Leo, who passed away, I believe, in 2007. She had spina bifida, and for everything I can gather, she was a lovely girl who suffered terribly. But Austin Roos, with interviews with Sally Leo and others, has written a book called The Littlest Suffering Souls. It's available on Amazon, and it's basically a push for Margaret Leo to become a saint. Not a joke, not an exaggeration. They pass
Holy
out cards. They pass out cards. I may have one here somewhere. Anyway, they pass out cards that says, you know, pray to Margaret Leo to get Jesus' ear, to do whatever, you know, you're praying for. I pray Margaret gets Jesus' ear and tells her dad and Clarence to stop trying to destroy democracy, but she hasn't heard my prayer yet. Anyway, there literally is a push to make her a saint. You know, as a father, if you lose a child, I can't imagine what the grief would be, and everybody suffers that kind of thing differently. Leonard's done it by donating thousands and thousands of dollars to the Opus Dei Center, having a picture on the artist's website. They start at $20,000, so I don't know how much this one was. Big picture of Leonard's daughter and Jesus, and they're handing out these cards. So, you know, on the one hand, it's kind of like a politician. You don't say anything about politicians' children, unless they put them in public. Leonard's put her in public.
Is that white Jesus with her in the picture, or is it a Middle Eastern complexion?
It's a white Jesus. It's a white
Jesus.
You mentioned who painted her portrait, right? And how this is a portrait artist who also does the Russians and Putin, like he has done Russians and he has done Putin. He's done a lot of Vatican stuff. I mean, I don't say that makes him a Putin apologist or a Vatican apologist. He's an artist out there doing his job. No, we just always look for the various connective tissues. We're going to talk about that aspect of this later, but yeah, I find that canonization story both, you know, like again, it's a tragedy, you know, that he had a child who had to endure such, you know, a difficult existence, but the canonization stuff is, again, as somebody who went to Catholic school in the Dark Ages, it's a little bit frightening.
He actually has two. He has two children with spina bifida.
Right.
One passed away. The miracle that they are putting forth that she did was when Sally Leo found out that she was pregnant with a second child with spina bifida. She prayed to Margaret, her daughter, to not let this child have as severe a case, and he was born and he doesn't. Therefore, it's a miracle, and Margaret deserves to be Saint Margaret.
Wow. I Hi-Fi, it's your turn. I want to quote one line because I want this to sort of sink in everyone's heads. When I was listening to your interview with Greg Olear, you said something very brilliant, and it's a through line for what we are doing here today. If you want to create a fascist society, you have to get the judges. And that is where we are. And that is why we, again, are doing this. And Hi-Fi, go ahead and jump in, but I just want everybody to know that this is our thesis for today.
So one of the things I'm very, very interested in is money, because I think money fuels these operations. Money is fueling the purchase and destruction of our democracy. It seems that Leonard Leo has purchased attorneys generals. He has purchased judges. Our legal system is compromised by this man. But when I look at his money, there's a lot of shell games going on. There are these 501c3s and these 501c4s and money shuffles, and people get paid, but they're doing things for the nonprofit. It all seems very, very shady to me. And it seems like there may be some criminal activity. Would you care to comment on that?
Well, there is a criminal investigation going on by the district attorney in Washington, D.C., a guy named Brian Schwalb. Heidi Presbel of Politico has written quite a bit about that. To tell you the truth, I don't know the specifics of the shell game and the money. People always ask me, and asked me for years, where does he get his money? I don't know. For the longest time, I did a lot of research on Russians, because Russian oligarchs, because there is very much a nexus between the American right-wing Christians, the anti-gay neo-Nazis in Germany, and the anti-gay Russian oligarchs. But a guy named Brian Brown here in this country. But I was never able to find a close connection where one of these guys was giving money to Leo. Now he's got $1.6 billion, so he doesn't need anybody's money now.
Right.
I mean, he's got his up until he got the judges on the court, it was all hide and seek, behind this curtain, behind that curtain, and so on and so forth, because he didn't want to be out there. Now that he's out there, it's no longer as big an issue. I think, as I understand it, what the Attorney General in D.C. is going after Leonard is similar to what the courts did going after Wayne LaPierre and the NRA, basically using money for his own personal gain. I mean, as soon as he got this money from Barry's side, he bought a couple of mansions in Maine. I mean, these are nice houses. There's a lot of questions about where Kavanaugh got the money to pay off his house before he became a Supreme Court justice. Also, he had some gambling debts, or some Washington baseball team.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
I have a follow-up
anyway,
to this. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
All right. But I don't know the money. If you want to talk about the money, call Lisa Graves at True North, I think it's called, or Alex Aronson. These are the two people who know the money. Alex was Senator Whitehouse's, one of his top lawyers when he was on the judiciary.
Right.
He's now out on his own doing, they just came out with a website yesterday called, I think it's called Maga Raga. It's basically all the Republican attorneys generals creating amicus for cases that have been trumped up, literally trumped up,
Yeah.
and then brought to the Supreme Court before the Leo court. As I just learned this morning, watching a video with Kevin Roberts, the head of Heritage. He calls it the Leo court,
Oh,
which
wow.
which is crazy. I mean,
wow.
the head of
He's
the
got
Heritage Trump.
the majority, right? I mean, he's got
Yeah.
five people on
Six.
there that are him.
Six.
Is it six? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Clarence Thomas. He helped get Clarence onto the
Right.
Supreme Court.
Exactly.
But Roberts and Alito, he picked, vetted, campaigned for, got them confirmed.
Oh,
Then Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. So
You
he's
betcha.
got six of nine.
oh.
I don't oppose extreme devout Catholics being involved in the political, public square. I do oppose six of anything
Yes,
being
of course.
dominated. I don't care if they're Muslims, Scientologists, Mormons, atheists, whatever. Six of anything dominating
Yeah.
the Supreme Court is not democracy.
No,
It's-
it's not democracy. Again, it goes back to your quote. It's how you create a fascist society. I've got something, but hi-fi, you next. You next, me, then Jim.
Well, this is just the follow-up to the money question that we were
Uh-huh.
discussing. One thing we do know is that Leonard Leo paid Ginny Thomas for her involvement in something. And unfortunately, it seems that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas neglected to declare that income. And that comes to us from Brent Allpress, who has also been a guest on this show. So that may be a bit of a snare that our Supreme Court justice has wandered into.
Well, I mean, it's not just Leonard giving money to Jenny that I believe he got from Kelly Conway,
Yes.
you know, or funneled through Kelly
Yes.
Conway. No mention Jenny, which I always thought would be the name of a great rock band. No mention Jenny. Anyway, I mean, again, the money stuff is beyond my ken. I know he's got lots of it, and
Yeah.
something like $600 million was spent putting all of Leonard's judges on the Leo court.
Wow. And just think about the tax breaks that were immediately, gained back with this avatar Trump, and of course with Citizens United, which has been such a wrecking ball on democracy. Okay,
Really has.
I want to talk about another brilliant line of yours about the unholy trinity, how you
Okay.
have basically three factions. You have the libertarian billionaires, you have the Christian nationalist foot soldiers out there, and then you have the extreme Catholics, all a part of what we are talking about. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Well, there's been a lot of work and reporting done on dark money. I recommend everybody who hasn't read it to read Jane Mayer's Dark Money, because the book is 5 or 6 years old now, but it's an excellent 101 on dark money and how it's being spent, and how these guys, going back to the Goldwater years, have been spending and plotting and working to take over the government. In 1980, I believe it was, David Koch ran for vice president on the Libertarian ticket and got 1.6% of the vote. They realized at that time there is no constituency for our platform. And his platform at that time was pretty much the MAGA platform of today. Anyway, so the libertarian billionaires, who basically want tax cuts and no regulation. They want to pollute like crazy. They want to drill like crazy. They want to make children work, dawn till dusk. They don't want any regulation. They don't want any taxes. But they have no voters to help with that. Where do we find voters? About the same time, Jerry Falwell and Paul Weyrich were all up in arms over what's the Bob Jones University finding from the Supreme Court, which basically says if you're being a racist, even if your religion says you can be a racist, even if the Bible tells you so, you cannot have tax breaks and Supreme Court and federal money, federal subsidies. And Jerry Falwell, all of these schools were built all over the country, Christian schools, right after Brown v. Education, when in the 50s, when the Supreme Court found that separate was not equal. White children have to go to school with black children. Whoa, my white kids are not going to go to school with black kids. We're going to start our own little Bible school over here. And they were chugging along just fine with all kinds of tax breaks and subsidies and so on and so forth, until Bob Jones. When Bob Jones said, okay, we're stripping you of your subsidies and your tax breaks, these guys went, holy cow, we got to do something about this. But racism does not sell in 1980. We need something else. And so what they came up with was, let's be anti-abortion. And so that was the beginning, really, of the big anti-abortion coalition.
It's so cynical. It's so cynical. So many of them don't believe it. So many of them have been proven to have had abortions, or their daughters, or like Trump, you've got the election interference case, but it is so cruelly cynical.
Right, it is. But that's where the libertarians got their foot soldiers, got their infantry, I sometimes call it. They didn't have money, or not like the billionaire money, which began flowing into these. And there's a whole list of them. It's the Kochs and the Ulines and the Scaife and Sheldon Adelstein, and I mean, and Barry Side. All of these guys were pouring money. But as other people have said, they didn't have that much organization. It was just an infantry of votes and door knockers. And they have the numbers. That's the votes. But how do you direct this? How do you channel it? How do you strategize and create a winning army? That's what Carl Holtz of the New York Times referred to when he called in 2019. He said there really is a DC Catholic mafia, a Catholic cabal here in DC, referring to Leonard Leo and his web. And I always point out that while there are dozens of books and articles on the evangelical Protestant Christian nationalists, there's next to nothing on the Catholic world. And it's Leonard Leo and Leo's court that are putting the points on the board. They're the ones that getting rid of Roe. They're the ones changing the gun laws. They're the ones threatening all the climate change stuff. Basically, everything since the New Deal. They want to wipe the New Deal off all the social safety net, Social Security, Medicare, all the stuff that the government does to help people. They want to get rid of it so they can operate like the oil barons and the railroad barons of 100 years ago. And they're getting it. I was talking to somebody the other day. People don't realize the Leo court, regardless of what happens, unless it's expanded somehow, will be running this country for the next 40 years. These are young judges. And if Trump gets elected in November, then you can expect to see Alito and Thomas retire pretty quickly and be replaced by a judge that's 30 years old, 25 years old, fresh out of law school.
It feels like the only reason this is not a criminal conspiracy is because it has this veneer of religion that makes it legitimate. Am I wrong in this feeling?
I think it's not only makes it legitimate. In my situation, trying to persuade reporters to cover him, I heard over and over and over again, this sounds like the Da Vinci Code. People are afraid of being accused of being Catholic bigots.
Yep.
My response was, this does sound like the Da Vinci Code, but it's real.
Yeah.
It's real. And it's only in January, the National Catholic reporter called Heidi Schlumpf, wrote a very good story on Leonard and Greg Mueller and Tim Bush and these guys and how they're operating here in DC. I mean, that was January. Here we are at the end of, what is this? The end of March.
April.
End of April.
Yeah, we're in April.
And why hasn't a mainstream media reporter done a follow on this? Why hasn't it? I mean, my op-ed focused on the New York Times, but it's not just the New York Times.
Yeah.
ProPublica, which has done some very good work since August 2022, when they broke the story about Barry Side and the money. They've done some excellent work since then. I was interviewed by a ProPublica reporter who is now at the Washington Post for 2 hours, hour and a half, at Ted's Bulletin on Capitol Hill, where I laid it out for him as best I possibly could on, what is going on. When he found out I had no documents and it sounded like the Da Vinci Code, he couldn't wait to get out of there.
Wow.
And he's got a book just coming out with the Washington Post. It's getting good reviews, and God bless him. But I do not understand why this story was lying around on the floor for anybody to pick up. Well, at least since Josh Marshall in 2010 wrote about Liberty Central. I mean, the first time we know that Leonard Leo and Harlan Crow, one of the billionaires that I failed to mention, sort of got together to do something was in 2004. They were the people behind swift boating John Kerry.
Right.
And swift boating, as you know, is another word for lies and smears.
Yeah.
And because it was all proven completely false. But Harlan Crow, Greg Mueller, and Leonard Leo have been doing this at least since 2004. So you've got that, 2004, you've got David Korn and Mother Jones and Josh Marshall at Talking Points memo writing about this in 2010.
Yeah.
Almost all of the reporting that ProPublica has done has been on past documents. It's been, they did a very good 3-hour podcast called Nobody Talks About Leonard. And the big thing that they uncovered and exposed and pushed forward was Leonard was working in the States early on. He was working in the States. And it was based on an Associated Press FOIA from like 2007 or 8, and other documents that were around 2009, 2010, 2013. So the information has been there if anybody had bothered to look. I will say Heidi Presbala has pushed the ball forward a lot with her reporting on the Oklahoma Catholic school case, which is coming before the Supreme Court, which would allow taxpayer money to totally fund a Catholic school, not just vouchers, but fund it. And
I want Jim to jump in on. I love that a bunch of Heidis are the women who are actually moving the ball forward.
But there's more than just you two.
I want Jim to jump in on why you personally, Jim, think that reporters avoid writing about the Leonard Leos, the Mike Flynns, the Robert Mercers. Yes, reporters do it, but not at the level that is necessary to wake up the public to the dangers that these people possess.
Yeah, I mean, I push pretty hard on certain subjects and get a great deal of pushback. So I've personally sort of felt the effects of trying to report and expose people like this. One person sort of related to that comes up a lot in my research is a guy named Peter Thiel, who in my view is very well connected to all of this. He was the president of the Federalist Society at Stanford, and he was good friends with Anthony Kennedy's son.
He was also mentored. He was also mentored by an Opus Dei priest.
Yes.
I know.
Father Arne Panula.
Arne
Yes.
Panula, who is also Austin Roos's pal.
Oh.
And Peter Thiel wrote like a giant epitaph for him when he, went to his funeral. And, why was this Opus Dei priest such good friends with, college kid Peter Thiel, and why were they friends for another 30 years or whatever? It's quite it's a very, very interesting combination to me. When you start to plot it out. Thiel was also Arne Panula was the guy who founded the Catholic Information Center, as we discussed.
Oh, here in DC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
Arne Panula ran it from the beginning until he died in 2007 or something like that. And
well, there was another priest. There was another Opus Dei priest who ran it for a number of years. A lot of conversions through him. Kudlow, Gingrich, Laura Ingraham, a bunch of these folks, and he was kind of run out because he got caught fiddling around with some of his female parishioners, and the Michelle Borstein at the Washington Post has done quite a lot of reporting on that. But he was very open in his early days about, we're going to get these people, we're going to get them in place, and they're going to be our moles. I always kind of describe it as there was like this. It's almost like mushrooms in your lawn. They're they're there underground, and then there's a big rain, and they all pop up. And
Wow.
that's what happened with Trump. Trump was the big rain for this Leonard Leo Opus Dei Catholic Mafia to pop up, and now they're everywhere. And so here
Wow.
we are.
Can I just
I
need to
have a question for Jim. Do you know of any hard connect? I mean, Mike Flynn and his brother are both hardcore Catholic extremists. Do you know of any connection between them and Leonard Leo? I understand they were all involved in the Council of National Policy, which Ann Nelson has written quite a bit, but I don't know of
Yes.
any hardcore connections between them, other than maybe they were in the same room at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great question, and no, I don't. Just to be clear, and I may be the world's expert on Mike Flynn, and I don't actually have a direct connection. The connection that I see is through Peter Thiel. So Flynn and Peter Thiel have been partnered for quite some time. And so to me, the connection there, the way that gets that power gets sort of flowed through is through Peter. And by the way, Peter's sort of senior funding partner are the Mercers.
Right.
So that, which brings in my opinion, the Russians a lot. Because the Mercers, Peter Thiel, there's
Cambridge Analytica.
Yes.
Cambridge Analytica.
Yes.
Steve Bannon.
Yes.
Steve Bannon, all of that.
There's a fascinating, sort of connection between these hardcore, extreme religious people, and it's not just Catholics, and the Russians, right? And it's their ideology is basically merging, anti-gay, all of the sort of Putin and the Russian Orthodox Church's bigotry is now kind of merged with ours, in my view. And there's just a sort of a conscious conspiracy, whether their paperwork or anything. What you see is them working together towards turning the United States into a theocracy
Right.
that can more easily be manipulated than a democracy. Is that consonant at all with your view?
Oh, absolutely. When I sort of went down the rabbit hole looking for Russians connected to Leonard Leo, I was sort of introduced by another Heidi, by the way, Heidi Byrick, who used to be with the Southern Poverty Law Center, there was a report called by the European Parliament that details all the money coming from the United States to the anti-gay groups in Europe, hooking up with the right wing there, as well as the Russian oligarchs. And I was surprised to find that the Federalist Society at that point, they had documented, it was like $6 million between the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation had been given to these groups. And believe me, at that time, Leonard was definitely the moneybags guy at Federalist Society. $5-6 million didn't go to Europe without him knowing about it, without him approving it. The report is really interesting. It's about a 20 or 30 page report. It's a little outdated now since it's 3 or 4 years old. But I can send you a copy if you haven't seen it.
Yeah. And my friend Dr. Ruth C. May was the one who originally, for the Dallas Morning News, documented all the Russian funding that was going into the extremist right politicians, the GOP at the time. She was the first to expose it. And when we talk about the connective tissue being the white supremacy and the LGBTQ plus and all of that, the anti-abortion, this focus on the family, World Family Congress, which we've talked about a lot on this show, it's all very cynical because, again, yes, sure, some of these people subscribe to the ideology, and maybe Leonard Leo is one of them. But for the most part, I did a deep dive on Mike Johnson. He's supposed to represent all of that.
Right.
I question what is really going on with Mike Johnson. And we always find the same story. You said it yourself. Every spy story, what do we always find? A lot of freaking skeletons in all these closets. A lot of people who hide the fact that they are gay, or or they basically are the most. Roy Cohn is the perfect example. Somebody, a mob lawyer who was Trump's mentor, virulently anti-gay, a gay man himself. We've seen this over and over and over again, these contradictions. Russia is not, Putin is not, the great bastion of, family values. That's just not, that's a
Right.
false narrative. And yet they sell these narratives because they're very well funded in how they sell these narratives. And then you get, 30 to 40 to almost 50% of the population voting against human rights and their own interests. And I bring it up because I find it disgustingly cynical. And I wish that there was more we could do to expose just how cynical it is. It's not based on, in my opinion, ideology. It's cynical, well-funded people who want their tax breaks and their judges.
Well, one of the things, back to the sort of Nazi analogy, one of the things I found was the US Army did polling in Nazi Germany during occupied Germany from like 1945 to 1950. And they found that about 35%, I mean, it varies a little bit here and there depending on what the question was being asked. But they found that, after Germany had been bombed to oblivion, after the Nuremberg trials, when everything was exposed, 35% approximately of the German population still thought Hitler was doing a good job and the Jews got what they deserved. So when you look at that and go, whoa, Trump's got 35% too. Is there 35% in every population who cannot be reasoned with, who don't care about facts, who don't care about science, who don't care about humanity? They just cling to whatever it is they believe. I don't know.
It's authoritarianism. People, there is a sort of human strain of authoritarianism, and it doesn't mean necessarily that they want to be the authoritarian. Some people like authoritarian, they want that sort of safety,
Right.
in their mind because what I see is a sort of the same psychological process that happened in Weimar happening here, to back up
Right.
your analogy. And it is a step-by-step sort of elevating of that strain in people, right? That sort of authoritarian, I want a strong man, to quote another friend of ours, Ruth Bengap. So, for me, there's that's always been the kind of underlying component to this, is that, yes, there is a certain part of the population that if you tell them that there's an authoritarian that is going to take care of them, they want it, they like it. I don't think I think that strain of humanity is what democracy is supposed to kind of contain, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to, are the rules and the kind of norms that we've built as a society is meant to kind of protect us from the psychopathic kind of spraying that we've seen a lot. And to me, it's the psychopaths in the world have basically taken over, and they are trying to make more of themselves, right? And so, for me, there's that's always what it seemed like.
That's so chilling, but such important stuff, gentlemen. Back to your question for Jim about connective tissue between Flynn and Leo and some of these characters. Our friend Brent Allpress explained that the Council for National Policy, which is the umbrella group of so much of this fuckery, after Flynn was pardoned, he immediately got some untitled position with the Council for National Policy and was on the payroll. And we see the kind of the dark coordination and the dark money coordination that I think eludes much of the media. Yes.
They definitely take care of each other. John Malcolm was Leonard Leo's hatchet man at USURF. As soon as Leonard got ousted by Durbin in 2011, he got a job at Heritage Foundation. Roger Severino was Trump's anti-gay guy at HHS. As soon as Biden was elected, Heritage hired Roger Severino, who is the husband of Carrie Severino, who runs Leonard's Judicial Crisis Network, which has spent the lion's share of the money getting the Leo court put in place. So yeah,
so many benign names for so much damage. I know that I can anticipate the answer to this question, but there was a attempted coup in this country. Jim Stewartson warned people not to go to the Capitol. And I'm grateful to you, Jim. And that left the radicalized bunch to just have to beat up on police officers, which is very odd for the party that's supposed to, respect law and order. But I bring this up because after January 6th, the billionaires, the libertarians, many of them backed away from Trump. They said, oh, no, this was bad. They're all back. So why do you think that they're all back? I mean, I know the answer, but I'd like to hear your response to that.
They see him as the way of cutting taxes and cutting regulation. And that's really all they want. People ask me, do they care about the culture war? And I think they may a little bit here and there, but basically they want no taxes and no regulation, which is why you see Arkansas and Florida now amending their child labor laws, making it so workers can't get a water break, that kind of stuff. It's really, it's
yeah. Well, there's the sort of end times mythology, right? The Jesus is going to come to rescue us fits into that methodology, right? If you don't think that the earth really matters, then the anti-environment and all of that stuff comes up. So what I've seen, unfortunately, is a weaponization of of Christian sort of belief about end times, evangelical, dispensational, I should say, to be clear. It's not all Christians. But the oil and gas industry has effectively merged with the apocalyptic religious right to basically put out the idea the earth really doesn't matter. What matters is making this a Christian world. If
that's true, I wish Jesus would get here and take these folks home.
Exactly.
But the idea of I find it very odd that there's a faction of Jewish conservatives who support Trump, when in fact, if their idea, as you're talking about, this sort of apocalyptic moment when Jesus returns, if they don't convert to Christianity, they're going to hell too.
Exactly. The whole pro-Israel kind of lobby of the right wing is the most incredibly cynical, anti-Semitic sort of idea, and it's astonishing to me, how much there is a sort of collaboration. And
I heard a Hagee, a guy named Pastor Hagee.
Oh yes, I know that guy.
I saw a video of him the other day talking about how Putin taking over Ukraine is part of the whole plan.
It's
So
Gog Magog. It's
yeah,
that
that, yeah, that, yeah,
it's
Ezekiel.
dispensationalism, Gog Magog. It's this sort of creation of mythology that fits the geopolitical end that they want, right?
So we can't give weapons to Ukraine, because if Putin doesn't take it over, then Jesus can't come over here.
That's it.
Wow.
That's
and
exactly
That's it,
convert everybody.
exactly. Yeah.
It's amazing,
And
amazing.
that's why they're pro-Israel, right? They're pro-Israel because they believe that it has to be occupied in order for Jesus to come. And so, you know, when I see these right wingers up there, you know, pro-Israel, no, that's not pro-Israel. That is pro-Jesus coming to eliminate all.
I have
Pro end
another question
times.
for you, Jim. If you
Yeah, please.
I love
Um,
this.
in Mike Flynn's world, in that world, he's got that theme park or something down in Florida, and where they shoot guns and stuff.
The Hollow, the
Oh, you mean
paramilitary
the
white
terrorist training center?
Yeah, that's
Okay, all right. Are the people that are with him, that come to his rallies and so forth, are they Catholics or are they Protestants?
no. I mean, it doesn't matter at all.
But from your take of what's going on here, are most of these the evangelical Christian nationalist types, or
it's both. So Flynn, you know, had a Catholic prayer event
right,
at
Mar-a-Lago,
Mar-a-Lago.
right? Yeah,
The people who participated, like one of them was Tim Ballard.
Yeah.
Tim Ballard is a Mormon who was just excommunicated from the church because Tim Ballard's the guy who did Sound of Freedom. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Oh, right. That same group of people with Roger Severino and Leo Severino just put out this movie about
Oh,
Cabrini.
No, it was are you talking about the are you
Mother
talking,
Cabrini.
oh.
There's a movie.
Oh
that
yes,
just come
it's the
out.
same. It's Angel
It's the
Studios.
same group.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
Angel
it's
Studios. Yep.
Okay.
And it's about there were, for a while, there was all kinds of ads everywhere I looked. I haven't seen anything recently, so I don't know how it's doing.
Well, it's really bad.
But this is
I saw a little bit. It's terrible.
Roger Severino's brother, Leo Severino, is one of the main guys as part of that whole network.
That's fascinating because
he was accused of grooming his now wife.
Yes.
He's like 40, 35 years old, and he's grooming this teenager, and she's now married to him, and I guess they have a bunch of kids.
He admitted it.
It's all good. It's all good. But I mean, this is, you know.
So that's very interesting because Lee Severino was a producer on Sound of Freedom.
Right.
Yes.
And because I saw that exact same thing, and it turns out that a lot of the producers on Sound of Freedom have serious problems and are very adjacent to very bad shit.
Yeah.
Not to
Nothing is shocking when it comes to this.
But yeah, so anyway, so Tim Ballard was, you know, created this kind of QAnon child trafficking movie. Mormon was one of the primary speakers at his Catholic event, right? So his whole thing is, and one of them is Jack Posobiec, who is just a full on, you know, neo-Nazi, right? And so, you know, his whole idea is to just bring all of these different identity groups, right? You're a Catholic, you're whatever it is, to bring them together under a sort of Christo-fascist umbrella. So, you know, are they, there are Catholics, there are every strain imaginable, and his sort of goal is to pull all of those people, all of those grievances, all of that kind of religious fervor into a single movement that's going to, you know, sort of destabilize, you know, the democratic world order.
Well, they might do it. They might do it.
Well,
Unless
they're
there's a blue-
close. They're very, very close.
Unless there's a blue wave in November, they might do it.
I need to nerd out for a second. So
Okay.
I'm a technology guy. I do computers, and I spend all day reviewing logs, right? And history to me is just logs. And we talked earlier about the Kerry Swift voting, right?
Right.
And the fact that Leonard Leo was attached to that. I would argue that the Swift voting was in response to something Kerry had done earlier in his history, which was the Iran-Contra investigations. Because on this show, we've interviewed, people associated with that. John Mattis, Jack Bryan, who did a podcast about it. But one of the interesting things, John, in Iran-Contra, there was an individual named Jack Singlob. Jack Singlob goes to Mike Flynn with the what was it, Jim? What's the name of the organization?
America's Future, which was founded in 1946 by Jack Singlob, who also co-founded the CIA. And Jack Singlob handed America's Future, which basically was an organization that thought that the wrong side won World War II. That's why he started it in 1946. And so 78 years later, Flynn is using it to promote Pizzagate, like the worst possible stuff. He's training police officers in, anti-government.
You jumped ahead too far, though. You jumped ahead too far in the logs.
Sorry,
I'm going to go back a little farther.
We
go back a little farther in the
not
logs.
Too
so
far.
we have not too far, but we have Jack Singlob to Mike Flynn. Then we have Mike Flynn and the individual who introduced Palantir to the U.S. government was Mike Flynn during our wars in the Middle East. So that is how that cancer was injected into our government and is growing and continues to grow because our government continues through military contracts to hand Peter Thiel more money, which seem to be going to run operations to overthrow our democracy. That's just me.
So our Hi-Fi is our network analyst. He follows the red blinking lights. I want to round this all out with something that you just said. Unless there is a blue wave in November, I posit that there has to be a blue wave in November, and that we will still continually be fighting this fight until we actually see some of these people fully defeated. And we question here if our Justice Department is up to it. If our FBI under Ray is up to it. We see these people
if our IRS is up to it.
We see that they've been defanged and defunded. We see these people as such incredible threats to national security, global security, the democratic world that emerged after World War II. And with our audience here, we box above our weight. We're followed by media. What would you say to just get people to understand why they need to start paying attention to elusive characters like Leo and what we can all individually do to ensure his defeat?
I'm going to be a glass half empty person here because I don't know. I mean, obviously we can vote and we can help others vote and register them to vote and drive them to the polls. But I see so much energy going into, Trump may be a fascist, but Biden's too old, that kind of stuff. And it I don't get it. And I don't know how to, even my own kids, they don't care. They're tacitly a little bit to the left maybe in their voting, but they see it all as just corruption on both sides, all this kind of stuff. And I don't even try to explain it to them any more than I tell them how to, raise their kids. They're just not interested. So I don't know. The other possibility is look for a house in Portugal. It's like
I actually have friends doing that right now as we speak. I laugh and cry at the same time. Yes, high five.
Yeah,
I have to ask this. What about the fact that Mr. Leonard Leo just displayed sheer arrogance in stating that he will defy congressional subpoenas?
Yeah.
Will that chicken come home to roost, do you think?
That depends on Durbin and White House, Senator White House, not the White House.
Yes.
They have any teeth? Will they enforce this stuff? I mean, Peter Navarro's in jail for not complying.
Bannon isn't.
Yeah.
Bannon isn't.
So Bannon's 3 blocks away from me in a house that it just makes me nuts that
oh my
he
God.
lives there. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Wow. Yeah.
Well,
seriously.
I'm just imagining
does your dog poop on his lawn?
Yeah. Is there like an opening in the clouds above his house or under the ground? I mean,
just this morning. Well, their office is at 300 Independence Avenue, which is 3 blocks from the Capitol, and 3 blocks in the other direction is the Freedom Corner J6 folks who are.
Yeah, don't get me started on that.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas Edsel did a very good article in the New York Times a week or 10 days ago, basically saying there's 3 powers in DC. There's the Heritage Foundation, there's the Leonard Leo group, and then there's the Jim DeMint group. Well, Jim DeMint's group has spent something like, and Leonard Leo's has as well, something like $50 million buying property up here on the Hill in the last couple of years.
Right.
And it's like, holy crap. I mean, they have gone from the airwaves to brick and mortar. They are building their little empire. And it breaks my heart. I don't know what to do. Rob Reiner's movie is very good. If you haven't seen it, the Capitol's part of my regular running, speed walking loop, and has been for 40 years. I know that every step, every part of that hill. I know, and it just, how did this happen? I'm at a loss. I don't know.
I would like to bring up another data point from the logs, specifically around DC real estate. Here is a data point from the logs for you. Peter Thiel, in one of the largest real estate transactions in Washington, DC, purchased Wilbur Ross's home. Wilbur Ross was Secretary of Commerce under Donald Trump.
We know.
Wilbur Ross was also chairman of the Bank of Cyprus while it processed a number of questionable transactions for a number of Russian oligarchs.
Yeah, right.
Where's his house?
I don't know the address. I just remember seeing the article.
We got to vote, or we got to move to Portugal. Those are our 2 choices. Final thing I'd love from you, and thank you guys. This was an incredible conversation. I got so much out of it. Final comment for you. We met because Ann Nelson sent me your op-ed showing the travails of trying to get the New York Times to do something on Leo. If the New York Times had done something on Leonard Leo when he really posed the threat that he posed, do you think we'd be in this situation? And does that paper still have the power to derail this fascist train?
People ask me that all the time. Would it have made any difference? And the answer is, I don't know. But what I do know is if the New York Times had done something in 2010, 2012, 2014, 2016, that would have given everybody else permission to do something as well. And all of those tax forms and everything that ProPublica and others have dug up in the past 2 years, they would have been found back then. Would that have made a lot of difference? Well, it would have. Every article you see begins with Leonard Leo is the most powerful man in America that you've never heard of. We would have heard of him. I think he should be covered the way the paparazzi cover Kim Kardashian and George Santos and Meghan and Harry. They should be camped on his doorstep. Right now, we've got 6 little old ladies in Maine in tennis shoes camped out at Leonard's doorstep. Where's everybody else? What could if they did it today, would it do anything? I don't know.
Wow.
It seems like we are fed the clowns while the real danger, the spiders, lurk in the shadows. To answer your question, I don't have an address. I'm not giving an address, but sold their 10,000 square foot home in Washington's Woodland Normanstone neighborhood.
Okay.
I think that's up in Northwest, I think, but I'm not certain.
I just go back to, well, the New York Times was doing but her emails,
Right.
casting shades on Hillary. Right as that was happening, Hillary Clinton was like, you guys, if Trump gets in, he might get to pick up to, 4 Supreme Court judges. Hillary Clinton told us what was going to happen. So had the New York Times done their job, or somebody of their weight, yes, there's a very good chance maybe people would have heard Hillary Clinton, warning everybody that this could actually happen. And again, if you want to create a fascist society, you have to control the judiciary. Going back to Burt Lancaster in Judgment at Nuremberg, the judges freaking matter. And I always look at what are the solutions. There are solutions. We can vote. We can have deep structural reforms. We can flood the Supreme Court. There are things that we can do to, take away the power that they have so craftily curated for themselves. So I'm not without hope, but it is dire, and I will have to look into Portugal. Thank you so much for being with us today. You are looking not only at a bunch of hardworking, activists, but we also love music, and I know you do too, and you play some guitar. So why don't we go out on a cautionary tale? Why don't we go out on you playing Sleepwalk?
Thank you very much for having me.